My hands were shaking as I watched Ethan place that damn pillow right down the middle of our bed. The white cotton barrier looked innocent enough, but it might as well have been a brick wall with barbed wire on top. He smoothed it down with deliberate precision, his jaw set in a hard line that told me everything I needed to know about our wedding night. "Cross this line and I'll send you to the hospital," he growled, his alpha scent sharp with disgust and something else I couldn't quite identify. Anger? Fear? Whatever it was, it made my omega instincts recoil like I'd been slapped. I stood there in the ridiculous white silk nightgown my mother had insisted I wear, feeling smaller and more pathetic by the second. This wasn't how I'd imagined my wedding night would go. Sure, I knew this arranged marriage wasn't going to be some fairy tale romance, but I'd hoped for basic human decency at least. Maybe a polite conversation about boundaries or, hell, even awkward small talk about the weather. Instead, I got a pillow fortress and a threat of violence. "I never wanted this marriage, Riley," Ethan continued, his back already turned to me as he pulled on a plain black t-shirt. The fabric stretched across his broad shoulders, and I hated how my stupid omega biology made me notice how perfectly it fit him. "And I sure as hell don't want you." Those words hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened and I had to grip the edge of the dresser to keep myself steady. The rejection wasn't just emotional, it was biological. Every cell in my body was programmed to crave my alpha's acceptance, his touch, his claim. But Ethan was giving me the complete opposite, and it felt like I was slowly suffocating. "The marriage papers are signed, the families are happy, and that's all that matters," he said, finally turning to face me. His dark eyes were cold, calculating. "But don't think for one second that this changes anything between us. We're strangers who happen to share a last name now. Nothing more." I wanted to say something witty, something that would show him I wasn't just going to roll over and take this treatment, but my throat felt tight, and I was terrified that if I opened my mouth only a sob would come out. So I just nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. Ethan seemed satisfied with my silence. He climbed into his side of the bed, making a point of staying as far from the pillow barrier as possible. The mattress barely dipped under his weight, and he immediately turned away from me, pulling the covers up to his chin. I stood there for another minute, just staring at the back of his head. His dark hair was still perfectly styled, despite the long day, and I could see the tension in his shoulders even through the blankets. Part of me wanted to climb into bed and pretend this was all normal, but another part of me wanted to grab that pillow and smother him with it. Eventually, the exhaustion from the day caught up with me. The wedding ceremony, the reception, the endless parade of congratulations from people who didn't know this was all a sham. It had drained me completely. I switched off the lamp and carefully got into my side of the bed, making sure not to even breathe in the direction of the pillow barrier. The mattress was huge, probably a California king, but it felt cramped with the invisible wall between us. I lay there staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every sound Ethan made. His breathing was too controlled, too deliberate. He wasn't asleep either. That's when I heard his phone buzz. At first, I thought maybe it was a work emergency or something innocent, but then he answered it and his whole voice changed. Gone was the cold, harsh tone he'd used with me. Instead, his voice became warm, almost tender. "Hey baby," he whispered, and my blood turned to ice. "Yeah, I know it's late. I needed to hear your voice." I squeezed my eyes shut, but I couldn't block out his words. They cut through me like glass, each one more painful than the last. "Don't worry about tonight. Nothing happened. Nothing will happen. This marriage is just for show, you know that." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "I love you too, Madison. This doesn't change anything between us." Madison. He had a girlfriend named Madison, and he was talking to her on our wedding night while I lay 3 feet away from him. The humiliation was so complete, so devastating, that I actually felt nauseous. "I'll find a way to see you tomorrow," he continued, his voice getting even softer. "Maybe we can meet at our usual place for lunch. I need to be with someone who actually matters to me. Someone who actually matters to me." The words echoed in my head, and I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. My eyes were burning with unshed tears, and my chest felt like it was caving in on itself. "I know this is hard on you too," Ethan was saying, "but we just have to ride this out for a while. Once the families are satisfied and things settle down, We can figure out how to end this quietly. Maybe a nice clean divorce in a year or two. A divorce. He was already planning our divorce on our wedding night. I turned onto my side, facing away from him, and pulled the covers up over my head. Silent tears started falling, soaking into my silk pillowcase. My whole body was shaking with the effort of staying quiet, but somehow I managed it. The phone call lasted another 10 minutes, filled with whispered endearments and promises that should have been meant for me. When he finally hung up, the room fell into the kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. I lay there for hours, listening to his breathing eventually even out as he fell asleep. Meanwhile, I stared into the darkness under my blankets, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. The pillow barrier wasn't just cloth and stuffing. It was his way of telling me I meant absolutely nothing to him. Less than nothing, actually. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be managed and eventually discarded. But as I lay there in the dark, something started to shift inside me. The initial shock and hurt were still there, but underneath it all, a different emotion was taking root. Anger. Pure white-hot anger. Who did Ethan Blackwood think he was? Yes, this marriage was arranged, but I hadn't exactly volunteered for it either. My parents had pushed just as hard as his had. The difference was that I was willing to try to make something work, while he was already planning his escape route. And this Madison person, she knew he was married and didn't care. She was perfectly happy to be the other woman, to steal moments that should have belonged to his wife. The fact that I didn't want those moments was beside the point. It was the principle of the thing. By the time the sun started creeping through the curtains, I had made a decision. If Ethan wanted a war, I was ready to give him one. This might be an arranged marriage, but I wasn't going to be the pathetic, ignored wife who just accepted whatever scraps of attention he threw my way. He thought he could intimidate me with pillow barriers and threats. He thought he could carry on with his girlfriend right under my nose. He was about to learn that this Omega wasn't nearly as weak or submissive as he assumed. The marriage might have started with his rejection, but it sure as hell wasn't going to end with my surrender. I discovered who Madison was completely by accident, which somehow made the whole thing even more humiliating. 3 days after our disaster of a wedding night, I decided to treat myself to coffee at this cute little place downtown. I needed to get out of the house. Our house, though it still felt foreign and unwelcoming, and I figured a vanilla latte and some people watching might help clear my head. I was sitting by the window scrolling through job listings on my phone when she walked in, tall, confident, with perfectly straight blonde hair and the kind of effortless style that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She ordered some complicated drink with extra shots and oat milk, and when the barista called out Madison, my blood pressure spiked. This was her. This was the woman my husband whispered sweet nothings to while I lay 3 feet away from him. I watched her from behind my coffee cup, taking in every detail. She was beautiful in that sharp, intimidating way that some women manage to pull off. Her clothes were expensive but understated: designer jeans, silk blouse, leather jacket that probably cost more than my car payments. Everything about her screamed successful, independent woman who didn't need anyone. So why was she settling for being someone's side piece? As if sensing my stare, Madison turned and looked directly at me. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the coffee shop. Then her eyes narrowed, and a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. She walked over to my table without invitation and slid into the chair across from me. Up close, I could see that her perfection was carefully constructed: expensive makeup, professional highlights, manicured nails that probably required weekly maintenance, but her beta scent was sharp with aggression and something else. Desperation. Maybe. So, she said, her voice smooth and cultured, "You're the pathetic little Omega who trapped my alpha." The audacity of it took my breath away for a second. Here was this woman, talking about her alpha when said alpha had a wife sitting right in front of her. But I recovered quickly, setting down my coffee and giving her my sweetest smile. "And you're the side piece who's apparently so forgettable that he married someone else," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Madison's perfect composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes flashing with anger. "Ethan told me all about you," she continued, leaning forward like she was sharing a secret. "How your scent makes him physically sick. How he can barely stand to be in the same room as you. How he's counting down the days until he can divorce you and forget you ever existed. Each word was designed to cut, and I had to admit, they found their mark. My chest tightened with that familiar ache of rejection. The same feeling I'd had every morning when I woke up to find Ethan already gone and the pillow barrier firmly in place. But I'd had 3 days to think about this situation, and I wasn't the same broken girl who'd cried herself to sleep on her wedding night. Funny, I said, taking a slow sip of my latte, considering he married me and not you. If you're so important to him, where's your ring, Madison? Her perfectly manicured hand clenched into a fist on the table. You don't understand what Ethan and I have, she hissed. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years of real love, real connection. You're just some arranged convenience that his family forced on him. Maybe, I agreed, which seemed to throw her off. But I'm also the one sleeping in his bed every night. Well, sort of sleeping. We have this adorable pillow barrier thing going on right now. But I'm optimistic that we'll work through it. Madison's face was starting to turn red, and I was beginning to enjoy myself. This woman had been so confident when she walked over here, so sure that she could intimidate me into backing down. But I could see the cracks in her facade now. I'll destroy you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'll make sure everyone knows what a joke this marriage is. Ethan will divorce you within 6 months, and then you'll have nothing. No husband, no family reputation, nothing. I leaned back in my chair studying her face. The desperation was more obvious now, mixed with genuine fear. And suddenly I understood something that changed everything. Madison wasn't confident about her position with Ethan at all. If she was, she wouldn't be here, wouldn't be wasting her time threatening me. She was scared. Scared that maybe, despite everything, this marriage might actually work. Scared that she was the one who was about to lose everything. You know what I think? I said, finishing my latte and gathering my purse. I think if Ethan really loved you the way you claim, he would have fought harder against this marriage. He would have stood up to his family, consequences be damned. Instead, he took the easy way out. Marry the convenient Omega. Keep the girlfriend on the side. I stood up looking down at her with what I hoped was pity rather than malice. That doesn't sound like the behavior of a man who's deeply in love. That sounds like the behavior of a coward who wants to have his cake and eat it too. Madison's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. I gave her one last smile and headed for the door, feeling lighter than I had in days. The encounter should have devastated me. Finding out exactly what Ethan had told his girlfriend about me, hearing in detail how much he supposedly hated everything about me, it should have sent me straight home to cry into that stupid pillow barrier. Instead, it energized me, because Madison had revealed something crucial in her desperation to hurt me. She was afraid, which meant there was something to be afraid of. When I got home that afternoon, Ethan was in his study with the door closed, probably working or talking to his precious girlfriend about their encounter. I could hear the low murmur of his voice through the wood, and for a moment, I felt that familiar stab of pain. But then I remembered Madison's face when I'd pointed out that she didn't have a ring. I remembered the fear in her eyes when I'd suggested that maybe Ethan's feelings weren't as clear-cut as she wanted to believe. That evening, when Ethan finally emerged from his study, he looked tired and stressed. His usually perfect hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it, and there were tension lines around his eyes. "How was your day, husband?" I asked sweetly from the kitchen, where I was making dinner. It was the first time I'd directly addressed him since our wedding night, and he froze like a deer in headlights. "Riley, he started, then stopped, clearly struggling with what to say. The guilt was written all over his face, and I realized that Madison had probably told him about our little coffee shop chat. "No explanations needed," I interrupted, stirring the pasta sauce with deliberate calm. "I actually had a very interesting day, met some new people, learned some fascinating things about my new life." Ethan's alpha sense shifted, becoming sharper with anxiety. "What kind of things?" I turned to face him, leaning against the counter with what I hoped was a casual pose. "Oh, just the usual stuff that comes with being newly married. Figuring out boundaries, understanding expectations, learning about all the different people in my husband's life." His face went pale, and I knew that Madison had definitely filled him in on our conversation. "Good. Let him sweat a little. Just remember," I continued, my voice still sweet and conversational. Married couples should share everything with each other. Hopes, dreams, secrets, Sunday morning coffee dates with old friends. I paused, letting that sink in. Communication is so important in a relationship, don't you think? Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides and his alpha eyes flashed with something dangerous. For a moment, I thought he might actually lose control, might finally drop the cold indifference and show me what he was really feeling. Instead, he took a deep breath and walked past me toward the stairs. "I'm not hungry," he said stiffly. "I have some work to finish." I watched him go, noting the tension in his shoulders and the way he moved just a little too quickly, like he was fleeing. Which I supposed he was. "I'll save you a plate," I called after him, "in case you change your mind later." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister so tightly his knuckles were white. For a second I thought he might turn around, might actually engage with me about what was happening between us. But then he was gone, disappearing upstairs to whatever safe space he'd created for himself away from his inconvenient wife. I finished making dinner alone, ate alone, and cleaned up alone. But for the first time since our wedding night, I didn't feel defeated. I felt like I was finally playing the game instead of just being played. Madison thought she could intimidate me into disappearing quietly. Ethan thought he could ignore me until I became invisible. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. Starting my new job at Henderson & Associates architecture firm was supposed to be my escape from the suffocating atmosphere at home. After 2 weeks of tiptoeing around Ethan and his pillow barrier, I needed something that was entirely mine, a place where I could be Riley the talented architect instead of Riley the unwanted wife. The office was everything I'd hoped for. Modern, creative, full of people who actually seemed excited about what they did. My supervisor, Janet, was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation on innovative, sustainable designs. She took one look at my portfolio and nodded approvingly. "We could use some fresh perspectives around here," she said, leading me to my desk. "Most of our junior architects play it safe. Your designs show real vision." It felt incredible to be valued for my skills again, to remember that I was more than just a pawn in some family business arrangement. I threw myself into the work, staying late to perfect my first project assignments and volunteering for extra tasks that might catch Janet's attention. That's how I met Derek. He was a beta around my age, with warm brown eyes and an easy smile that made me feel instantly comfortable. Derek worked in the landscape architecture division, and we ended up collaborating on a mixed-use development project that required both building and garden design. "Your instincts for natural light are incredible," he said during our first planning meeting, leaning over my shoulder to look at my sketches. His scent was clean and uncomplicated. No underlying aggression or dominance games, just genuine appreciation for good work. "The way you've positioned these windows to capture the morning sun while avoiding heat buildup in the afternoon, it's brilliant." I felt myself blush at the praise. When was the last time someone had complimented my actual talents instead of just making polite small talk about my family connections? "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than he probably realized. "Your landscape integration ideas are amazing too. I never would have thought to use vertical gardens as natural sound barriers." Derek grinned, and something warm settled in my chest. This was what normal professional relationships felt like. Mutual respect, shared creativity, the simple pleasure of working with someone who understood your passion. Over the next few days, Derek and I fell into an easy rhythm. We grabbed coffee together in the mornings to discuss project details, ate lunch at our desks while sketching out new ideas, and stayed late comparing notes on design software. It was completely innocent, completely professional, but it was also the first time since my wedding that I felt like myself again. "You know," Derek said one afternoon as we reviewed the latest client feedback, "you should be really proud of this work. I've been here 3 years and I've never seen Janet get this excited about a junior architect's designs." I looked up from my computer screen, where I'd been adjusting the lighting specifications for the main lobby. "Really, she seemed pretty reserved when she looked at them yesterday." Derek laughed. "That's Janet's version of jumping up and down with excitement. Trust me, she thinks you're a star." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "And she's not the only one. You're incredibly talented, Riley. I hope you know that." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I was so used to being treated like an inconvenience or a burden that genuine appreciation felt foreign. My eyes started to water and I had to look away before I embarrassed myself by crying at my desk. "Hey," Derek said softly, his hand briefly touching my shoulder. "Are you okay? Did I say something wrong?" "No," I managed, giving him a watery smile. "You said something very right. I haven't heard that kind of encouragement in a while." Derek's expression darkened slightly. "Well, whoever's not encouraging you is an idiot," he said firmly. "You're amazing, Riley. Don't let anyone make you forget that." For the rest of the day, Derek's words echoed in my head. It was such a simple thing, basic human decency and professional respect, but it felt revolutionary after weeks of Ethan's cold indifference. That evening, I actually found myself humming as I made dinner. When Ethan came home from work, I was in a genuinely good mood for the first time since our wedding. "Good day?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral as always. "Actually, yes," I replied, not bothering to hide my smile. "My supervisor loved my latest project proposal, and my colleague Derek thinks I might be up for a promotion within the year if I keep up the good work." I didn't miss the way Ethan's entire body went rigid at Derek's name. His alpha scent shifted, becoming darker and more intense. "Derek?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Derek Morrison. He's a landscape architect in my firm. We're collaborating on a mixed-use development downtown." I kept my tone light and professional, but I was watching Ethan's face carefully. His jaw was clenched tight, and his hands were curled into fists at his sides. "Collaborating," he said like the word tasted bad in his mouth. "Yes, that's what architects do when they work on projects together," I replied, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "We collaborate, we share ideas, we have working lunches and coffee meetings to discuss design specifications." Ethan's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "And this Derek, he's the one texting you throughout the day? The one calling you amazing and talking about your future career?" My blood went cold. "Have you been reading my messages?" Instead of denying it, Ethan stepped closer, backing me against the kitchen counter. His alpha presence was overwhelming, filling the space between us with barely contained aggression. "You're my wife, Riley. Mine. That means I have a right to know who's sniffing around you." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "Your wife?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The same wife you won't even sleep in the same bed with? The same wife whose scent supposedly makes you sick? The same wife you're planning to divorce as soon as it's convenient?" Ethan's hands slammed against the counter on both sides of my head, trapping me. His face was inches from mine, his scent dark with possessiveness and something else I couldn't quite identify. "That's different," he growled. "How?" I demanded, my own anger rising to match his. "How is it different, Ethan? You get to carry on with Madison while I'm supposed to live like a nun? You get to whisper sweet nothings to your girlfriend while your wife sleeps alone behind a pillow wall." Because, he stopped himself, his jaw working like he was physically swallowing the words. The confession hung in the air between us, unspoken but tangible. "Because you're mine," he'd been about to say. "Because the thought of another man touching you, wanting you, makes me crazy." We stared at each other for a long moment, both breathing hard. This close I could see the conflict raging in his dark eyes, want warring with denial, possessiveness fighting against his determination to keep me at arm's length. Finally he pushed back from the counter and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me shaking and confused. That night the pillow barrier stayed firmly in place. But something fundamental had changed. Ethan was restless, tossing and turning in a way that made the whole mattress move. Every few minutes, I'd feel his eyes on me, but when I'd peek over the pillow, he'd already be facing away. Around 2 in the morning his phone buzzed with a text. I heard him check it, then immediately delete whatever it was without responding. Madison, probably, wondering why he wasn't answering her calls. I lay there in the dark, my mind racing. Ethan's reaction to Derek had been pure alpha jealousy, the kind of possessive rage that only happened when someone threatened what they considered theirs. But how could I be his when he supposedly hated me? How could he be jealous of another man's attention when he couldn't stand my presence? Unless he'd been lying about all of it. The next morning, Derek texted me about grabbing lunch to discuss the client's latest revision requests. Instead of the innocent pleasure I'd felt at his messages before, now I felt a thrill of something else entirely. If Ethan wanted to play games, if he wanted to keep me at a distance while still claiming ownership, maybe it was time to show him what he was really risking. Derek was sweet, attentive, and genuinely interested in me as a person. Maybe it was time to see just how far I could push my husband's carefully constructed indifference. I texted Derek back with enthusiasm, already planning what to wear to lunch. If Ethan was going to check my messages anyway, I might as well give him something interesting to read. The war between us was escalating, and I was finally ready to play offense instead of defense. I should have seen it coming. The stress, the constant emotional upheaval, Ethan's rejection messing with my biology. Of course my heat cycle would go haywire. Usually, married omegas stabilize within the first few months, their bodies syncing with their alpha's presence and scent. But with Ethan's constant cold shoulder and that damn pillow barrier, my system was completely confused. It hit me at work on a Thursday afternoon. One minute I was reviewing blueprints with Derek, and the next I was burning from the inside out, my skin hypersensitive and my thoughts becoming hazy around the edges. The familiar ache low in my belly made me gasp and grip the edge of my desk. "Riley?" Derek's voice sounded far away, even though he was right beside me. "Are you okay? You look flushed." I tried to answer, but my throat felt thick and strange. The onset was faster than any heat I'd ever experienced, probably because my body had been fighting it for weeks. Emergency heat suppressants could only do so much when your alpha was actively rejecting you. I need to go home," I managed, already reaching for my purse with shaking hands. Every movement sent waves of need through my system, and Derek's beta scent, which had always been comforting, now felt completely wrong. My body was calling for something else, someone else. "I'll drive you," Derek offered, concern clear in his voice. "You shouldn't be alone when you're—" "No." The word came out sharper than I intended. "I mean, thank you, but I can manage. It's just, I need my alpha." The admission burned almost as much as the heat itself. After everything Ethan had put me through, my traitorous body still wanted him, still needed him in the most primal way possible. I barely remember the drive home, white-knuckling the steering wheel as waves of fever washed over me. By the time I stumbled through the front door, I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. My skin felt like it was on fire, and every instinct I had was screaming for Ethan's scent, his touch, his presence. I made it halfway up the stairs before my legs gave out. The world tilted sideways, and I collapsed on the landing, my breathing shallow and rapid. This was bad. Really bad. Heat without an alpha's comfort could be dangerous, especially one this intense. That's when I heard Ethan's car in the driveway. "Riley?" His voice echoed through the house, followed by the sound of his footsteps. "Are you home? Your car's in." He found me curled up on the stairs, probably looking like death warmed over. His alpha scent hit me like a physical force, and I couldn't stop the whimper that escaped my throat. Finally, my body was getting what it had been craving. "Shit," Ethan breathed. And then he was beside me, his hands hovering over my body like he was afraid to touch. "Riley, are you in heat?" I tried to nod, but even that small movement sent sparks of need through my system. "It came early," I whispered. "The stress, the rejection, my cycles messed up." Ethan's scent changed immediately, becoming darker and more complex. I could smell his concern, his alpha instincts warring with whatever walls he'd built between us. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said, but his voice was strained. "No." I grabbed his wrist with what little strength I had. "Don't leave me, please." The contact sent electricity through both of us. Ethan's breathing hitched, and I saw his control wavering in real time. His alpha biology was responding to my need whether he wanted it to or not. "Riley, I can't. I'll hurt you," he said, but he was already scooping me up in his arms, carrying me toward our bedroom. "I don't know how to be gentle." "I don't care," I whispered against his neck, breathing in his scent like it was oxygen. "I just need you here." He laid me down on our bed, not his side or my side, and for the first time since our wedding night, the pillow barrier was nowhere to be seen. Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress, his hands clenched into fists as he fought his own instincts. "Tell me what you need," he said, his voice rough. I answered honestly. Just you. The next few hours blurred together in a haze of fever and desperate need. Ethan stayed with me through all of it, cooling my skin with damp cloths, holding me when the shaking got too bad, whispering apologies I thought I'd never hear. "I'm sorry, Riley," he murmured against my hair as I pressed against his side, seeking his warmth. "I'm so damn sorry for everything. The pillow, the coldness, making you feel unwanted. You don't deserve any of this." "Then why?" I asked between chattering teeth. "Why do you hate me so much?" "I don't hate you," he said, his arms tightening around me. "God, Riley, I don't hate you at all. I hate myself for wanting you when I know I'll only hurt you." His confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest in a way nothing else had been since our wedding. I wanted to push for more, to demand explanations, but the heat was still burning through my system and all I could do was curl closer to him. Sometime after midnight, when the worst of the fever had broken, I felt Ethan's lips press gently against my forehead. It was soft, tender, nothing like the cold husband I'd married. His scent wrapped around me like a blanket, finally giving my body the comfort it had been craving. "Sleep," he whispered. "I've got you." For the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares, without the ache of rejection. I slept in my alpha's arms, exactly where my biology said I belonged. When I woke up the next morning, Ethan was still there. He was sitting in the chair beside the bed, fully dressed but looking like he hadn't slept at all. His dark hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and there were deep circles under his eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked when he saw I was awake. "Better," I said, and meant it. The fever had broken completely, leaving me weak but clear-headed for the first time in days. "Ethan, last night was a mistake," he interrupted, standing up abruptly. "I should have taken you to the hospital. I shouldn't have. We shouldn't." And just like that, the walls were back up. The tender, apologetic alpha from the night before was gone, replaced by the cold stranger I'd married. "So that's it?" I asked, sitting up in bed despite my lingering weakness. "You take care of me through my heat, tell me you don't hate me, and then we go back to pretending nothing happened." Ethan's jaw clenched. "It can't happen again, Riley. Last night was just biology, just instinct. It doesn't change anything between us." But I could see the lie in his eyes, could smell it in his scent. Last night had changed everything. Whether he wanted to admit it or not, the careful distance he'd maintained was cracking. And we both knew it. "Fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that's how you want to play it." Ethan nodded stiffly and headed for the door. But he paused at the threshold, his hand gripping the frame so tightly his knuckles were white. "Riley," he said without turning around. "About Derek." "What about him?" "Just be careful. Not all betas are as innocent as they seem." And then he was gone, leaving me alone with the lingering scent of his concern and a dozen new questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. The next few days were torture. Ethan went back to his cold, distant routine. But something fundamental had shifted between us. I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His eyes dark with something he refused to acknowledge. The pillow barrier reappeared, but it seemed smaller somehow, less like a wall and more like a desperate attempt to maintain control. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from Derek, asking if I was feeling better and when I'd be back at work. His concern was sweet, genuine, but every text seemed to make Ethan more agitated. I'd hear him pacing in his study late at night, talking in hushed, urgent tones to someone on the phone. Madison, probably. Trying to figure out why her perfect alpha was suddenly acting strange. I was making coffee Tuesday morning when Derek's name appeared on my phone screen again. This time it wasn't a text he was calling. "Riley, thank God you answered." Derek's voice was warm with relief. "I was starting to worry when you didn't respond to my messages yesterday. Are you feeling better?" "Much better. Thank you," I said, very aware that Ethan was in the kitchen doorway behind me, his alpha scent sharp with tension. "I should be back at work tomorrow." "Great. Listen, I know this might be forward, but there's this new art gallery opening downtown Friday night. The architect is someone Janet thinks you should meet. She's doing some incredible sustainable housing projects. Would you maybe want to go with me?" As colleagues, of course. I could practically feel Ethan's glare burning into my back. The smart thing would be to politely decline. to avoid poking the bear when things were already so volatile between us. But I was tired of walking on eggshells around my own husband. That sounds wonderful, I said, injecting genuine enthusiasm into my voice. I'd love to go. Perfect. I'll pick you up around 7. Actually, why don't I meet you there? I might be coming straight from another appointment. The lie rolled off my tongue easily. I wanted the option to drive myself, just in case things got complicated. After I hung up, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Ethan stood there for a long moment, his face carefully blank but his scent telling a different story entirely. A date, he said finally, his voice flat. A professional networking event, I corrected, turning to face him. With a colleague. You know, the kind of thing married people discuss with their spouses before making plans. Don't. The word came out sharp, dangerous. Don't pretend this marriage is something it's not. What is it then, Ethan? I demanded, my own patience finally snapping. Because I'm getting mixed signals here. 1 minute you're carrying me through my heat, whispering apologies and holding me like I matter. The next minute you're back to treating me like a stranger. Which is it? Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. It was biology, Riley. Alpha instincts responding to an omega in need. It didn't mean anything. Bullshit. The profanity felt good coming out, liberating after weeks of careful politeness. If it was just biology, any alpha could have helped me. You chose to stay. You chose to take care of me. Because you're my responsibility, he shot back. But there was something desperate in his voice now. You're my wife on paper, which makes you my obligation. Nothing more. Fine, I said, grabbing my purse from the counter. Then, as your paper wife, I'm informing you that I'll be out Friday evening. Don't wait up. I was almost to the door when his voice stopped me cold. He's not good enough for you. I turned slowly, finding Ethan standing in the same spot but looking like he'd aged years in the past few minutes. His carefully maintained composure was cracking, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. Excuse me, Derek, Ethan said, his voice rough. He's not good enough for you, Riley. None of them are. And you are? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and Ethan flinched like I'd slapped him. No, he said quietly. Especially not me. There was something so broken in his voice that it stopped my anger cold. This wasn't about possession or alpha dominance. This was about something deeper, something that had been eating at him long before our arranged marriage. Ethan, I said softly, stepping closer. What aren't you telling me? For a moment I thought he might actually answer. His dark eyes were filled with a pain so deep it made my chest ache. But then he shook his head and turned away. Forget it, he said. Go to your gallery opening. Have fun with your beta colleague. Just be careful. Okay? That Friday night, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. Part of me wanted to dress up, to look stunning and confident in everything an alpha's wife should be. But another part of me, the part that had seen the pain in Ethan's eyes, just wanted to stay home and force him to have the conversation we'd been avoiding for weeks. I ended up choosing a simple black dress. Elegant but not overly formal. As I was putting on my earrings, I heard Ethan come home from work. His footsteps paused outside our bedroom door, and for a moment I thought he might knock. Instead, I heard him continue down the hall to his study. The gallery opening was actually lovely. Derek looked handsome in his dark suit, and he was the perfect gentleman opening doors, bringing me wine, introducing me to other architects with genuine pride in his voice. The featured artist's work was incredible, and I found myself actually enjoying the evening despite everything. You look beautiful tonight, Derek said as we stood in front of a particularly striking sculpture. That dress is perfect on you. Thank you, I said, accepting the compliment with a smile. Derek really was sweet. Under different circumstances, in a different life, I might have been genuinely interested in where this could lead. But even as Derek's hand brushed mine while pointing out details in the artwork, all I could think about was Ethan, the pain in his voice when he'd said he wasn't good enough for me. The way he'd held me during my heat like I was something precious. The careful way he avoided looking directly at me lately, like I might disappear if he acknowledged what was happening between us. Riley? Derek's voice brought me back to the present. You seem distracted tonight. Is everything okay? I'm sorry, I said, feeling genuinely guilty. Derek deserved better than a date who spent the whole evening thinking about her complicated husband. I guess I'm still not feeling completely back to normal yet. No worries at all, Derek said with that easy smile of his. How about I take you home? You should rest. The drive back to the house was comfortable, filled with easy conversation about work and the evening's arts. Derek walked me to the front door like the gentleman he was, and for a moment we just stood there under the porch lights. I had a really nice time tonight, he said. Maybe we could do this again sometime. When you're feeling more like yourself? Derek, I started, then stopped. How could I explain that the problem wasn't how I was feeling, but who I was feeling it for? It's okay, he said, reading my hesitation correctly. I can see there's something else going on. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here. As a friend, if nothing else. He leaned down and pressed a soft, gentle kiss to my cheek. It was sweet, innocent, the kind of gesture that should have made my heart flutter. Instead, it made my blood run cold, because I could see Ethan standing in the living room window watching us with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, murderous rage. Derek left with a final smile, completely unaware of the storm he'd just triggered. I stood on the porch for a moment gathering my courage, then walked into the house to face whatever was waiting for me. Ethan was standing in the middle of the living room like a statue, his hands clenched so tightly at his sides that I could see his knuckles were white. His alpha scent was dark and dangerous, filling the room with barely contained violence. How was your professional networking event? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. It was fine, I said carefully. The artist's work was incredible and I made some good connections. And Derek was a perfect gentleman. Ethan's laugh was harsh, bitter. A perfect gentleman who kisses married women on their doorsteps. It was just a friendly kiss goodnight, I protested. On the cheek, it didn't mean anything. It meant something to him, Ethan said, taking a step closer. And it sure as hell meant something to me. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest and completely unexpected. Ethan's carefully constructed walls were finally crumbling, and what was underneath was terrifying in its intensity. What do you want from me, Ethan? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You push me away. You tell me this marriage is just for show. You make me sleep behind a pillow wall like I'm diseased. But then you get jealous when another man shows me basic kindness. What do you want? I want you to stop making me feel things I have no right to feel, he said, his voice breaking. I want you to stop being so damn perfect when I know I'm going to destroy you. I want you to stop looking at me like I might actually be worth something when we both know I'm not. The pain in his voice was so raw it made my eyes water. Ethan, what are you talking about? Why do you think you're going to hurt me? 'Cause I always do, he said simply. I hurt everything I touch, Riley. Everyone I've ever cared about ends up worse for knowing me. And you, God, you're so good, so bright, so full of hope despite everything I've put you through. I can't be the one to break that. Finally, I was getting to the truth. This wasn't about not wanting me. This was about being terrified of wanting me too much. So you'd rather break both of us slowly, I said, understanding dawning. You'd rather we both be miserable than risk the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. Ethan's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked younger, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. I love someone else, he whispered, but it sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. No, I said firmly, stepping closer. You love the idea of someone else because it's safe. Because she doesn't threaten whatever story you've told yourself about not deserving happiness. Riley, don't. I'm your wife, Ethan. Not on paper, not for show. I'm your wife in every way that matters, and I'm not going anywhere. So you can keep fighting this, keep making us both mither, or you can trust me enough to let me decide if you're worth the risk. We stared at each other across the living room, both breathing hard. The air between us was charged with everything we'd been holding back, everything we'd been too afraid to say. I don't know how to be what you need, Ethan said finally. Then let me teach you, I replied. Let me show you that you're already enough. 3 weeks passed after that night in the living room, and if I thought things were tense before, it was nothing compared to this. Ethan was walking around like a man at war with himself, and I was caught in the crossfire. The pillow barrier stayed, but I'd catch him staring at it like it personally offended him, His phone calls with Madison became shorter, more strained until they stopped altogether. I didn't push. After seeing him so vulnerable, so broken down, I realized that pressuring him would only make him retreat further. Instead, I focused on just being present. Making coffee for 2 in the morning. Cooking dinner whether he joined me or not, treating him like a husband instead of a stranger, regardless of how he responded. Slowly, incrementally, I started to see cracks in his armor. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening at his parents' house for their monthly family dinner. Ethan had been dreading it all week, his tension ratcheting higher with each passing day. I'd offered to make an excuse so he could go alone, but he'd insisted I come with him. They expect to see us together, he'd said stiffly. Playing the happy couple. The Blackwood family mansion was everything I'd expected. Old money elegance with enough formality to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Ethan's mother, Patricia, was a sharp woman who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. His father, Richard, had the same dark intensity as Ethan but with an added layer of cold calculation that made my skin crawl. "Riley, dear," Patricia said as we sat down for dinner. "You look lovely tonight. Marriage certainly agrees with you." "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood," I replied, very aware of Ethan's tension beside me. "Please call me Patricia. We're family now." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Speaking of family, Richard and I were just discussing how wonderful it would be to have grandchildren running around. "When can we expect some good news?" Ethan's hand tightened around his wineglass, so hard I was afraid it might shatter. "Mother, we've barely been married 2 months. "Exactly," Richard boomed from the head of the table. "When your mother and I were newlyweds, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. You should have had her bread by now, son." The casual crudeness of the comment made my stomach turn. Ethan's scent spiked with anger and something else, protective fury directed at his father. "Dad," Ethan said through gritted teeth, "that's enough." "Oh, don't tell me you're having trouble in the bedroom," Richard continued, oblivious to or ignoring his son's warning tone. "Riley seems like a healthy enough omega. Maybe you need some of those enhancement pills." I said enough. Ethan's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. "Riley is my wife, not some broodmare for your entertainment." Patricia laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. "Defensive, isn't he? Perhaps the problem is that you married beneath your station, darling. The Morrison family has good bloodlines, but they're hardly our social equals. Maybe if you'd married someone more suitable, you'd be more motivated to fulfill your obligations." I felt my face burn with humiliation. But before I could say anything, Ethan was on his feet. "Don't," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't you dare talk about Riley like that. She's worth 10 of any of the shallow, vapid socialites you wanted me to marry." "Ethan," I said softly, touching his arm. "It's okay." "No, it's not okay," he said, turning to look at me with fierce intensity. "They have no right to speak to you that way. No one does." Richard's face was turning red with anger. "Sit down, son. You're embarrassing yourself over some omega gold digger." The wine glass in Ethan's hand finally shattered from the pressure. Blood dripped from his palm onto the white tablecloth, but he didn't seem to notice. "We're leaving," he announced, pulling out his phone with his uninjured hand. "And if I ever hear either of you speak about my wife with anything less than complete respect, this will be the last family dinner you ever host." He called our driver while I grabbed napkins to wrap around his bleeding hand. His parents sat in stunned silence as we walked out, their perfect family dinner destroyed by their son's unexpected defense of his unwanted wife. The drive home was silent except for my fussing over Ethan's cut palm. He let me clean and bandage it without protest, his dark eyes watching my face with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly as we pulled into our driveway. "Yes, I did," he replied. "They were wrong about you, about us." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "Riley, I need to tell you something." My heart started racing, but I kept my voice calm. "Okay." Inside the house, Ethan paced around the living room like a caged animal while I waited on the couch. Finally, he stopped in front of me, running his good hand through his dark hair. "I broke up with Madison," he said abruptly. 2 weeks ago, the confession hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "After your heat. After that night. I couldn't keep lying to myself. Or to her." He sat down on the coffee table facing me, close enough that I could smell his scent, clean and complex and purely him. Madison and I, we were never really in love. We were comfortable, convenient, safe. Safe from what? Ethan's laugh was bitter. From this. From feeling something real that could actually matter. He looked up at me, his dark eyes vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. I've been terrified of you since the moment I met you, Riley. Terrified of how much I wanted you, how much I needed you, because everyone I've ever loved has left or been taken away, and I couldn't handle losing you too. My throat felt tight with unshed tears. So you decided to push me away first. It seemed safer, he admitted. If I never let myself care, I couldn't get hurt. If I kept you at a distance, you couldn't disappoint me or abandon me like everyone else has. But the pillow barrier, the coldness, telling Madison you hated me, all lies, he interrupted. Every single word was a lie I told myself to keep from falling completely in love with my own wife. The words hung in the air between us, honest and raw and terrifying. Ethan's hands were shaking as he reached for mine, his thumb tracing over my wedding ring. I don't know how to be a good husband, he said quietly. I don't know how to love someone without destroying them. But Riley, God help me, I want to try. I want to learn. If you'll let me. I looked at this broken, beautiful man who'd spent weeks tearing us both apart because he was too afraid to hope for something real. The smart thing would be to protect myself, to demand time and space and proof that he wouldn't just retreat again when things got difficult. Instead, I leaned forward and cupped his face in my hands. Then learn, I said simply. We'll learn together. When he kissed me, it was nothing like the cold politeness of our wedding day. This was desperate, hungry. Months of denial and want poured into the connection between us. His hands tangled in my hair, and I could taste the salt of tears on his lips. His or mine, I couldn't tell. No more pillow barriers, he whispered against my mouth. No more walls, I agreed. No more pretending I don't want to claim you properly. My heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? Ethan pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes intense with promise and desire. I'm saying I want to be your husband in every way that matters. I want to mark you, claim you, make you mine so completely that no one will ever question where you belong. I smiled, feeling giddy with hope and want and the sheer relief of finally having him be honest with me. Then do it, Ethan. Make me yours. He stood up, pulling me with him, his injured hand forgotten as he led me toward the stairs. Are you sure, Riley? 'Cause once I claim you, I'm never letting you go. You'll be stuck with a possessive, jealous alpha who's only just figuring out how to love properly. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the man who'd put me through hell because he was too afraid to admit he wanted heaven. Then it's a good thing I happen to love possessive, jealous alphas who are terrible at expressing their feelings, I said, especially ones named Ethan Blackwood. His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. I love you too, Riley, more than I've ever loved anything in my life. This time, when we walked into our bedroom, there was no pillow barrier waiting for us. There was just a man and his wife, finally ready to become what they were always meant to be.